going to be painting this pretty little scene, really limited palette. And for this week's video, I decided I wanted to try something a little new, and I'm using a piece of color fix that I've had in my paper collection for a while. This is, of course, a white piece of color fix. And I'm also going to be avoiding the wet underpainting. I wanted to try a dry underpainting. That's something I don't often do, but because Color Fix is kind of picky about the wet media that you use, I wanted to just see what would happen with the dry underpainting. You can see the reference photo popping up there on the left, and I am just starting as I normally would, even though I decided not to do the wet underpainting. I'm going to put in my shadow shapes with this blue new pastel, sketching very lightly the tree shapes, the shadow shapes, and of course then this little building. I like to put my buildings in and mostly paint buildings when they're tucked into vegetation. I find that makes it a little easier. Buildings can be difficult to render in any painting really, and so you just kind of want to suggest the building shape. If at this point I get off in my perspective, then I can always go back in and readjust later. Using the side of this blue new pastel to lightly mark the angles of the roof line and where the bottom of the building meets the grasses, the window, that kind of thing. And then also putting the vegetation around the building. I want these edges to be pretty soft and really have that foreground edge. I guess you would call that the left side corner. That's going to be the hardest edge in that building. The other edges are going to almost blend in with the vegetation. Here's another little building. It's actually a storage shed. It's more of a flat topped structure. Just sketching in, leaving those areas on the inside of the building where the walls are. I'm not going to put pastel on those right now, so I'm just marking the outline of those buildings. And then of course you can see just filling in the areas where there's going to be trees, that distant field in the back with the trees that are peeking out behind on that distant field, and then also the road. What I noticed about this color fix, I don't normally use color fix, and it felt very, very similar to the Richardson papers that I used in one of my other videos. Very, very toothy, doesn't a lot. I'm losing a lot of pastel at this point just because of the tooth. And so that is something that's new to me. The UArt paper that I use is a little finer grit than this color fix. And I have read and done some research, and I've used color fix in the past, but a pretty long time ago. And so I know color fix does not like alcohol, and it is okay with water. But like I said, I wanted to do a dry underpainting for you folks that don't normally like to do the alcohol washes or the watercolor. So now I'm just pulling in a piece of my pipe foam, or this is actually that smaller foam that I just got at my hardware store, and I am going to blend this pastel application into the paper because although I'm not doing a wet underpainting, this would kind of be considered a dry underpainting because I still do need to cover the whiteness of the tooth of this paper. I'm just swiping it in. This part actually went really easily. It's not hard to blend in some pastel, but I did want to retain those pieces of especially the two structures and not cover them with pastel. And that just helps me to kind of see them, to refine them later on in the process. Blending the edges, blending the foliage maybe into the edges of them, but leaving the main walls clear of pastel. And once I put this initial dry underpainting, I'm going to go back in to darken some specific areas of the painting. I'm still using that blue new pastel and then establishing the shadows up in those trees where the sunlight is not hitting where the branches are reaching over this road in this little house. I'm going back in and using more of the tip to create some of the branches of the trees, and then the side of the pastel to create more of like the deep shadows at the bases of the tree. Now this is a Terry Ludwig, and I am starting to apply the more soft layers of pastel. And this is a very green, summery, bright day here in Texas. This scene is from. And so there's going to be a lot of green in this piece. I purposefully created it to be pretty analogous and kind of a limited palette. And I'm just going to work back and forth with some greens. The distant trees where I didn't reapply the darker new pastel the second time I went in, those are tree boughs and branches that are behind the more forward dark trees. On those trees, I'm using more desaturated, more gray, cool colors, but they're just not quite as vibrant. I'm going back and forth, choosing quite a bit of greens, but I'm just using pretty small little scumbling marks to establish where the leaves are and how the light is affecting those leaves. Trees can be a difficult subjects because it's almost like when you're painting a flower where you can get lost in the detail of the tree, or as in flowers, you can get lost in the petals. And this is where I'm thinking about the shapes of the values and the shapes of colors that I'm using. That's one reason why I like to establish the darks pretty close to the beginning. And like right now, I'm putting in some more darks because I'm looking at the reference photo pretty closely for this piece. Sometimes I don't, but in this case, I am wanting to be pretty accurate in how the light is affecting it, because that was what brought me to the scene in the first place. As you can see right there, that is actually a Townsend pastel. I love Townsend pastels. They have a wonderful texture. And though that's a much more classic spring green color, because it's going to pull those branches forward. I'm not drawing a line that indicates a branch. What I'm painting and what I'm sketching with these pastels are the clumps of the leaves that are on the branches. So you don't have to draw a branch, and I normally don't draw branches. Maybe some that are peeking out as they weave their way in and out of a tree. But what I like to indicate are the shapes of the clumps of the leaves on the branches. Now I'm just going to put in some quick sky. I'm going to layer on this color. Whenever I put this on, the value is a little close to the tops of the trees, and so that'll be adjusted. I want to just kind of create that base, cover up that really thick color fix texture that I'm not quite used to. This was an experiment in paper for me, and then adding a little bit of turquoise there, some greens, just to lighten it up a little bit, experimenting here. That's what painting is. Sometimes you have to go back and forth to see what works. You might have an idea in your head and then you put it on and you think, nope, that's not the one. But I just wanted to establish that top edge of those trees, some little peeking sky holes in, blending that sky color into the tree so I don't have any kind of halo effect going on. You always want to make sure that the sky and the leaves are meeting and mingling, not just hitting up against each other to where there's a super hard edge. Often talk about how sometimes I move to a different area of a painting when I'm happy enough with what I've done. So I'm happy enough in the trees right now. I've established the darks, I've established kind of the lights. Sometimes you have to get the flavor for what you need to do next, you have to keep going to other areas. And some artists, they work all over the painting all at the same time, and sometimes I do that. But for a scene like this, I like to work on one thing and then another. And sometimes you can't finish what you've worked on until you start pulling together other pieces of the painting. And that's what happened in this case. I wanted to see what the colors were going to do and how they're going to mingle at the base of this painting. I added those really spring greens where the light is hitting the grasses. I'm going to establish a little bit of road here and just get in some color there. I also added in some of the same green that I put on the ground into that tree that's catching the light against the building. And of course, I haven't done anything to the buildings yet. Adding in some warm, that's a Terry Ludwig, very warm green right there. Maybe softening the edge of that tree hole that's over there on the left-hand side. Adding in some color right there where there might be some light hitting those bushes in front of that little house or storage area, whatever it is. What I find the key to using greens is it's really varying the color temperature of the green that you're using. This, of course, right now I'm painting in the highlights on the grasses where the sun is really hitting those areas strongly. In other areas, it's going to hit it more indirectly, and it's also going to be informed by the shadows of the trees that are casting down onto this lawn. Whenever I first began painting, this would be the stage where I would start to panic and think, I don't know, it's so ugly, I don't know what to do, how do I keep going? This is whenever, if I would be plein air painting and somebody would walk up on me during a stage like this, I almost wanted to apologize and say, no, I promise, it's gonna get better. Hi everybody, it's Bethany and I'm here in my studio. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you learned something today, I would love it if you would give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and also click that little notification bell so you can know whenever I have a new video coming up. If you'd also love to support this content coming out, I would love it if you would consider visiting my Patreon page. The link is below. I'm so excited to be bringing these lessons to you weekly, and I hope you're excited too. Bye.